Welcome to Lord of the Rings Weekly. I'm Drew Kreisman.
And I'm Ira Kreisman.
And on this episode, we continue our conversation on the Fellowship of the Ring. When last we left our heroes, they were leaving the elves behind and heading down the river, being tracked by the fiend known as Gollum from the riverbanks, I suppose. More sweeping shots of beautiful New Zealand and the boats they're going down, and all the practical on-site location filming that these films were known for, and it's just, it's big, and it's grand, and we've been through a lot of different parts of the adventure, and now this is the part where we're in the boats going down the river.
Absolutely. And we're intercut with the Uruk-hai. Remember the genetically superior orc type folks running through the woods, presumably toward the Fellowship.
Yeah, good editing there, right? As they're sort of rowing and they don't look or are acting or feeling like they're in imminent danger, but because of the way it's edited, we understand that the Uruk-hai are heading their way. So Aragorn and Boromir are in a boat and having some back and forths about what to do about Gollum, right? Sam and Frodo are having their dynamic where Sam tries to get Frodo to eat and Frodo doesn't let Sam take care of him as well as he should. No, wanna. And Sam has one of his many, many beautiful lines about taking care of Frodo where he says, "I'm here to help you. I promised Gandalf that I would." And then Frodo gives him the, 15-year-old emo band hair flip and says, "You can't help me, Sam."
Right. And it's worth remembering he just had that big conversation with Galadriel, right? And she told him the ring will corrupt every single one of your friends. One by one, they will fall victim, right, to its evilness. And Frodo's not going to let that happen to his friends. So no one can help him. And especially he's not going to let it happen to Sam.
Right? And then we're back over with Aragorn and Boromir bickering a little bit. Boromir says, "Minas Tirith is the safer road. You know that." And you have no ulterior motive to go to Minas Tirith?
Uh-huh.
I love Aragorn's line here where he says, "There is no strength in Gondor that can avail us." Back to our conversation on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and strength.
Right.
It's not the kind of strength we're looking for, man.
It's got to hurt, though, right? I mean, I think they do a good job of setting Aragorn and Boromir against each other here without it, like, coming to blows. Like, they're pissed at each other, kind of. They're disagreeing, but Aragorn's in charge. And I think Boromir's frustration is understandable.
And it's interesting because even though Boromir will soon play out the folly of man, he makes what would be in a lot of other things the right speech, right? In the Marvel movie. Okay, yes, there is weakness in humanity. Evil villain who says you want to subjugate us all, right? But, he says, there is courage also, and honor to be found in men. You will not see that, he says to Aragorn. Saying basically, you trust the elves more than men, more than your own people, he calls them. And then he makes an interesting point saying that all your life you have hidden in the shadows, scared of who you are, of what you are.
Yeah, Aragorn is a bit focused on the past, right, of Isildur and his screw-up at Mount Doom. Boromir's not wrong here. And I think the movie does a good job of showing that conflict without painting Boromir as a bad guy. Because even though he's about to fail pretty spectacularly, it's only for a moment. All it takes is a moment, right? And he's not a bad person for it.
Right. I wish he'd have tagged him here by calling him a Strider. That's one thing, like, how dare I edit this script? But he says, you lived in the shadows, scared of who you are, of what you are. Strider. Give him one of those, right? Yep. Like,
because he's not wrong.
Yeah. Aragorn totally deflects too. Now he's right. I mean, this was part of the conversation, and so he's getting to the point of the matter, but he doesn't answer any of that. He just says, I will not take the ring within 100 leagues of your city. He calls it not our city, your city. It's obviously more Boromir's than Aragorn's because Boromir's lived there and fought for it and all of that, but there's also this sense of it's not mine, which it gets into the complication of the whole thing, right? Like it's supposed to be, but clearly right. Boromir at this point cares way more about it than you do, which is gotta be frustrating for him.
So they spend the night, they get up in the morning, they're back in their boats going down the river. They're pretty elven boats. By the by, I really like that Galadriel's personal canoe is in the shape of a swan that we saw back in back in the elven town. I thought just everything's very pretty. They do a good job, attention to detail.
Yeah.
So we're going down the river, and suddenly we are greeted with an amazing sight. Like, they're miniatures. I get it. They didn't sculpt these giant stone statues in real life, but they look
They pull
real.
off the trick, don't they?
Holy
this is some
moly.
Movie magic. Yeah, this is one of the first. This is a memory in your life, right? You
right.
remember seeing this for the first time in the theater and going, "Oh my god!" Like of all the Dungeons and Dragons games we played as kids, or Magic the Gathering, or stuff where it's in your imagination a lot of the time, or even the Final Fantasy games, and nothing had ever looked like that before.
One of the things I love about it is that it's obviously built out of these giant blocks of stone, and you can see in the canyon to either side of these giant statues is the stone has been quarried out in these blocks, in these steps, and you can see, they took the stone from the canyon here and shaped it here to be these statues. It's meticulously detailed world building, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And Aragorn taps Frodo on the shoulder and says, Look. Long have I desired to look upon the kings of old, my kin, the Argonath. It really is quite beautiful.
Yeah. It evokes the great Colossus, right? Is something that it's supposed to, and there's a reference to that as well in Game of Thrones. There's a giant stone figure sort of guarding the entrance to a city. And I have learned later on, adding even more emotional, because it's not just his kin, in theory, in general, or whatever, that this is Isildur. And in the movie, I think I'm going to get this right, but correct me, somebody in the Discord or wherever in the comments if I'm wrong. I think in the movie, it's Isildur and his father, Elendil, which was a change from the books where it is Isildur and his brother. And
interesting. Okay.
Anyone watching Rings of Power knows there's a bit of mystery and intrigue around Isildur's brother. And we don't know, that's not any spoiler beyond that. It's just there is a brother. But it's interesting, right? Because it's a part of that age that Tolkien wrote about more sporadically and without a lot of details connecting the connective tissue, which is really what the show is doing, is connecting those things and doing its own version of telling the story. But it adds another element here that, the Argonath aren't just these enormous statues of the ancient peoples of Numenor. They're particularly those people. And again, slight spoilers for the show, but if you've watched the trailers or if you've read the Silmarillion or any of that, you know that Numenor also has these giant statues of other ancient kings. And instead of holding their hands out in defiance the way the Argonath is, here they have their hands open in a welcoming gesture. It's like, again, just the history. You talk about world building and history and stuff. We thought this was the most amazing thing we'd ever seen when we were kids. We didn't know any of that.
Right, yeah.
So learning about it just makes it that much cooler.
So they're approaching the waterfall. So they pull off to the side of the river, as one does, and pull the canoes up, and they're going to spend the night here, cross the lake in the morning, and be on their way. We approach Mordor from the north, says Aragorn, and Gimli says, "Oh yeah? It's just a simple matter." I love this. It's just a simple matter of finding our way through Emmenmule, an impassable labyrinth of razor-sharp rocks. And after that, it gets even better. And Merry and Pippin are like, wait, what? Festering, stinking marshlands as far as the eye can see.
Mm-hmm. This is more of that signposting that you like.
Yeah. Especially since they're about to dismiss a bunch of it. Like, I think that's one of the best things, is to set up expectations and then immediately undercut them.
Uh-huh. So they're sort of like, this is the part where they're getting ready to settle in, and then Legolas's spider sense starts tingling.
Uh-huh.
And when the elf gets unsettled, everybody else pays attention, right?
Right, yeah. They're like the Moogles in Final Fantasy V. They've got a psychic sense about things.
So he turns to Aragorn and says, "We should go." And Aragorn at first goes, No. There's orcs all along here on the shores. We need to wait for the cover of darkness," which I don't fully understand here, because the orcs work in darkness, but I guess because there are a few of them, they just are hard to see. I don't know, but
maybe so. Well, and
sure.
as Boromir just said, he hides in shadows, right?
Good point. But Legolas is saying that's the Eastern Shore is what worries me, he says. He's like getting a sense that the Uruk-hai exists, but he doesn't know what that is, right? He didn't. I love the way they tell this part of the story. It's like he knows, again, it's the spider sense. He knows that something's wrong. He just doesn't really know what. And that can make it difficult for people to be like, okay, we'll just do whatever. But you still should when the elf's ears perk up, literally. Yeah.
So they're making camp, and Merry brings some firewood back and toss it in the pile, and then he looks around and he says, "Hang on, where's Frodo?" And then we get a zoom in on Mr. Samwise Gamgee, who's leaning against a tree or something, and he's half dozing, and he hears Merry say that. Sean Astin as Samwise Gamgee is just perfect. He suddenly looks so guilty.
Yeah.
Like, I rested my eyes for a moment, and now Frodo's gone.
Yeah.
What I promised Gandalf the Grey, my old friend who's now dead.
Yeah.
Oh man. Just the look on these guys' faces sometimes is brilliant.
I know. These movies never got enough credit for their acting. People always talk about the special effects or the practical effects or all the on-scene stuff, and it's all great, but the acting really is very, very good.
So he looks around all panicked, and then we get some really good camera work because we focus in on Boromir's shield lying with his baggage. So Boromir is also gone.
Yeah.
So speaking of Spidey sense, I don't know if that's meant to be that Sam gets that Boromir's the threat, but we know.
Right.
Because we've been getting those hints all along. So then we cut to Frodo wandering around, presumably collecting firewood, or maybe just, like you were saying, doing the hair toss. There's a giant stone head. You talked about comparing the Colossus of the Argonauts, not the Argonauts.
The Argonath.
The Argonath, right. All throughout Wheel of Time, because we are in the former empire of Arthur Hawkwing. If we're out, away from civilization, Jordan will spend a lot of time describing fallen monuments and old castles and whatnot. So seeing like this giant stone head that he wanders past is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Boromir, even the son of the Steward of Gondor is not immune from the chore of collecting firewood, right? So he's literally got firewood in his arms, and it's very innocent at first.
Yeah.
None of us should wander alone, you least of all. Yeah, I mean, yes, obviously, correct.
Precisely
but knowing
for this
what
reason.
We know,
yeah,
it feels very sinister.
Yeah.
And I want to be absolutely clear that Boromir is not a bad guy.
Right.
He is just, he's under a lot of pressure, and he succumbs for just long enough at just the right moment.
Speaking of more great acting, I mean, Sean Bean really does do a lot in this scene to go from a legitimately scary threat to actually starting with mostly pretty innocent, maybe he won't go there, to, oh, he's going to go there, to at the end feeling deep remorse for it, and you buy it the whole way because, like you said, it's not as simple as bad guy, evil guy, did the bad thing. It's everyone is tempted by the ring. Even Galadriel is tempted by it. She just wins over better. She just has a bit more self-control thanks to thousands of years of training for that moment. You know, Boromir hasn't had thousands of years, and he's not a magical being. You know, he's a man who wants to protect his friends and his family, and a lot of times that makes a lot of us do weak things. So, yeah, I feel for Boromir, man. I feel for him here.
He says, so much depends on you. I know why you seek solitude. You suffer. I see it day by day. Are you sure you do not suffer needlessly? And now here he's being tempted, right? There are other ways, Frodo. Other paths we might take.
Yeah. And that's when, you know, it's like, oh. I mean, he's, again, not wrong. You start from a place of truth, but...
I would use the ring for good, right?
Yeah. And he even makes that argument. He says, I only ask for the strength to defend my people when Frodo pushes back. You know, what he was just saying to Aragorn, but he thinks maybe it'll work on Frodo a little bit better.
If you would but lend me the ring. And Frodo backs up, and that seems to set Boromir off.
Yeah.
Right? Why? You don't need to run away from me. I'm not a thief. I mean you no harm. But it's working on him, right? What chance do you think you have? They will find you. They will take the ring, and you will beg for death before the end. Right? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Because he's coming after him. So Frodo runs, and Boromir chases.
Yeah. That's brutal. That's heartbreaking.
It is not yours save by unhappy chance. It could have been mine. Oh, no. It could have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me. Oh,
My
God.
precious.
No, it's so sad.
Yeah.
Oh. But Frodo knows at least one trick of the ring and puts it on and disappears. He kicks Boromir in the nuts and runs away.
Yeah, yeah, right. Right.
And for a moment longer, Boromir is held. Right? I see your mind. You will take the ring to Sauron. You will betray us. You go to your death and the death of us all. Curse you and all the halflings. And he falls to the ground. And that's all it took. Like, that was, what, 10, 15 seconds?
Yeah.
That's all it takes to delay them long enough to get Frodo to put on the ring, to call the Uruk-hai. Right? Oh, man.
Yeah.
And he immediately apologizes.
Yeah.
Now that he's back in his right mind. What have I done? Please, Frodo. I'm sorry, Frodo.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is, man. It's hard to watch to this day. So because Frodo has put on the ring, we get more of that. What I have come to learn is called the unseen world, which is this vision dreamland, right? Where you kind of travel through and you get images, and so you get all that kind of white and black, but like hyper saturated, almost like it's an X-ray. And you get a lot of that. And then we get these visions because like in the powers from the trees in Game of Thrones, essentially it's like the internet. Having the ring, it gives you the internet, and you can like see across time and space and hack into a tower. So it's like Frodo was like seeing from the top of a tower across Mordor so that he can see the Dark Lord's eye and the burning eye of Sauron and hear the black speech and, get really freaked out like any of us would because it's messed up. So he's trying to, take the ring off and falls and is in an absolute panic when another human being approaches him. And now now you're Aragorn, and Frodo's like,
Right.
Get away from me, you people. And that's exactly how you would react. And, Aragorn starts asking after Frodo, and Frodo says, it has taken Boromir, he says. And then Aragorn starts asking after the ring, which is natural to do, but freaks Frodo out. No, not you too, you know. And Aragorn's giving them the I swore to protect you. He's like, yeah, so did the other guy. Can you protect me from yourself? Frodo says. And that's why it makes absolute sense what Frodo is about to do next. Because it's like, these people may have every desire to protect me. But all it takes is a moment of them falling to the temptation. And that could be it. So I'm going to have to run off on my own. My own. My super own. It's sad. And Frodo even asks Aragorn if he thinks he could destroy it, and the ring speaks to him. And at first it calls him Aragorn, and then it calls him Elisar. And they start using your ancient names and stuff. And then this when you know. I was like, oh man. Again, I think adding to the point that just because Boromir's the one who did end up betraying the Fellowship and Frodo, it could have been Aragorn. It could have been any of them, if given the right circumstances, or the wrong circumstances, as it were. And then, again, of all the beautiful moments, I think this one, there are two here, obviously, coming up that are going to make the top 10. I think this one would, though I'd have to think about it, from the movie. This is... Aragorn doesn't fight with him. There's no back and forth. He just kneels down, gives him a look of understanding. He understands what Frodo intends to do. And without saying, okay, run away or whatever, he just says, I would have gone with you to the end, into the very fires of Mordor. God. My king. Well, we'll get to my king, but... I would have gone with you to the end, he says to Frodo, into the fires of Mordor. And this is where the two most important heroes of ending the doom, as it were, part ways, right? That is their final... Right? And Frodo just says, I know, look after the others, especially Sam. He will not understand. No, he won't.
No.
He very emphatically won't.
Oh, God. And one of the things I love about this is Aragorn sort of reaches for the ring, but what he does is he closes Frodo's hand over the ring.
Oh, yeah.
And gives it back to him.
Beautiful gesture. Literally and figuratively. I would have gone with you to the end, man. Guy's a poet.
He really is.
So off goes Frodo, and Aragorn turns and draws his sword and looks like a badass. And again, it's like
he does.
A sweet, beautiful moment with your friend where you took his hand in your hand and said, I would have gone with you to the end. And then you turn around and do this shit. Like, he can be both.
Because the orcs are coming. Man. So now we get this big... It's not a... It's a fight, but it's also running away.
Yeah,
there's a lot of...
super chaotic, isn't it?
Yeah, it really, really is.
In a good way, though.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be chaotic, because everyone's spread out. We don't have like a united front against, the charging orcish horde. Rather, everyone's spread out. We don't have, we're not in a defensible position. It should be chaotic. So Frodo runs off, and Aragorn starts taking on the Uruk-hai. Down nearer the camp, everyone's looking for Frodo, right? Because we just realized, oh, where's Mr. Frodo? And then they start hearing the sounds of battle. Legolas and Gimli arrive. Legolas is shooting dudes, and Gimli's leaping off of stones to chop into Uruk-hai. Is this the moment where Legolas does that cool thing where he stabs an Uruk-hai with his arrow and then fires the arrow into another one?
He uses it as a dagger to stab the guy through the face or the throat or whatever, and then pulls it back and shoots it. Yeah. I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that I was going to hold off on this rant, and I'll do the short version of it now because it has once again come up in Rings of Power. Elves doing cool shit is cool. There are one or two moments where the CGI is a little funky, or they make it look a little strange, and people feel a certain way about it. In the Hobbit trilogy, there's a thing where he's like running up a bridge that's collapsing. That's a little bit, but they're described in ways it's very difficult for us to understand. Like when Tolkien says that they're lighter than air, and so there's like a scene earlier where, as they're all trudging through the snow, right, Legolas is just walking on top of it, and it's very subtle,
right.
Uh-huh. But then sometimes it doesn't have to be subtle. Sometimes a dude does some stuff, like some of the things that have happened in Rings of Power, or some of the stuff that Galadriel has done, or like this stuff. The skateboarding down the stairs is awesome. Like, it's weird to me that people are like down on that. Is that not what we come to fantasy stuff for? Is to see cool things like this? Like, if I want to see a real archer do realistic archer things, I'll watch a movie about, I don't know, the Battle of Hastings or something, you know, where there was real archery. But this is an elf, and I want to see him do cool elf shit.
Even like Hawkeye and Green Arrow in them, they're regular people, I guess, but they have superhuman arrow shooting ability.
Right.
Like the way Hawkeye fires his arrows, that's not real. Not really.
Right. So when there's an even more of a built-in excuse, which is that elves, especially those who've been around for a very long time, are incredibly adept at doing this. Whenever there's a battle, you go, what cool shit is Legolas going to do? You should be. That was so it's always weird to me that there's a group of people out there who's like really negative about those things. Because I've always seen them as highlights of the movies.
Right. It would be like if Daredevil suddenly showed up in the She-Hulk show and did all this cool acrobatic stuff, and then some dude bros complained that he was too acrobatic, which is a thing that has happened. I don't understand that complaint.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right. So, yeah, Legolas rules, and he rules at doing cool stuff, and there's a bunch of it in this fight scene, too. Gimli gets to have some big moments. Unfortunately, Merry and Pippin don't get to do a whole lot before they just get nipped, as our British friends say.
The thing they get to do, though... Well, I'll just describe it here, right? Because Frodo hides behind a tree, and Merry and Pippin see him.
Yes.
Like, oh, hey, Frodo, we found you. Come over here, hide with us. Because remember, hobbits are very good at hiding.
Right.
And Frodo looks at him, and he's got it. He's still thinking about what Galadriel said. No, I can't.
Yeah.
And Pippin doesn't get it right away. You know, Merry is the older, more mature one. Pippin says, "What's he doing?" And Merry says, "He's leaving."
Yeah.
And Pippin's like, "No, we can't do that." And he runs out there, running toward Frodo, and Merry goes after him. And then they stop because they're out in the open, and Uruk-hai see him. And then Merry says to Frodo, "Run, Barry, run."
Totally, though. Totally. It's so great, dude. It's just this unspoken. They just make eyes and go, this is the moment we become heroes. This is our role to play. You must take the ring, which means that what we can do right now is make sure that you can take your next steps. And they start doing over here, and that whole thing.
Yeah, it's great. And Pippin, it takes Pippin a little longer, but he gets there, and he picks up what's being cooking or whatever. So they run off, and Frodo gets to get away. And the Uruk-hai do not immediately murder these hobbits because, remember, Saruman said, one of the hobbits holds something of great value.
Right.
So they capture him instead. And Pippin says, "It's working. I know it's working. Run."
Yeah.
And then they're totally captured.
And then captured.
We hear the sound of a horn.
Yeah.
And Legolas says, "The horn of Gondor." So Boromir is on his own, taking on Uruk-hai, chopping him down. He's making a good accounting of himself. Aragorn runs that way, and oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then we get the scene, right? This is the scene. The scene, the big emotional moment where Boromir gets to look like a badass in battle for a while. He's doing his thing, but very, very abruptly. I'm like the biggest arrow I've ever seen.
Honestly, and it's at least partially in defense of Merry and Pippin. Like the hobbits are running away as he is like fighting to give them some time. It doesn't work because, like we just said, they get captured. And it's also, I think, a really neat detail is when we finally get to Boromir fighting, his horn is cut in half,
Yeah.
which is some kind of symbolism, right? Like the horn of Gondor,
Yeah.
split in twain.
Right.
Oh man, and yeah, the arrows of the Uruk-hai are massive.
Yeah. And he just takes one right in the chest, or right in the back, and then in the chest. I can't remember which one hit, but it's so. I like the way the music cuts out, and the whole thing lets you know immediately, like, oh, he gonna die.
Yeah, and he takes like 3 or 4 shots and is still fighting.
Yep, doing that thing. You'll love it.
And Aragorn shows up, like, because Uruk-hai with the arrow is gonna comes right up on Boromir, is gonna like shoot him in the head, point blank range, double damage.
Yeah, right.
And Aragorn shows up, and there's a big fight. At one point, Aragorn is backed up against a tree, and the Uruk-hai's shield has him pinned there by the throat, and he's got to like rip his own ears off to get out from under there before he gets decapitated. It's a cool fight.
Yeah, it is. It's intense. Even in arguably, especially the way it ends with the sort of Cloud Sephiroth impaling thing, where finally Aragorn gets what you would think would be a killing blow, just runs him straight through, and then the Uruk-hai just runs himself further through and gets right up in Aragorn's face. And then he pulls that thing out and whacks that dude's head off, and it's just
he does.
God.
There's a moment where the guy playing the Uruk-hai throws a dagger at Viggo Mortensen, but like threw it wrong and actually threw it at Viggo, and Viggo had to like actually bat it aside with his sword.
I heard that, and I heard that was a real dagger, like that they didn't that he actually got cut doing that. Yeah, somebody in my Discord was saying that like that's one of the most badass moments in behind the scenes movie making history, was that he accidentally picked up a real dagger, and then he was supposed to throw it kind of near Viggo Mortensen, not actually right at him, and he did, and he bats it aside, and that's real.
Jeez.
Really,
movie making can be dangerous. I think he loses a tooth at one point.
That's right.
Viggo does, and he breaks his toe when he kicks something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Jeez. All right.
And then. So what's the first thing? So Aragorn wins the fight. He's covered in blood or whatever. And he runs over. And the first thing Boromir says, they took the little ones.
They took the little ones.
Because the last thing he had said was curse all the halflings, which is to that point of corruption can make you someone you're not. We've talked about the analogy to drug abuse before, and kind of the way he recovered almost looked like an addict shaking and coming out of it, right? And he's got this like realization that that's not who he was, and that's not who he wants to be, and that's not certainly what he wants his final act to have been. So his final act wasn't betraying Frodo. It was protecting Merry and Pippin, and it was telling Aragorn they took the little ones. Because he's a hero.
Yeah. Sword in his hand so he can put it to his chest, and Legolas and Gimli show up to see the passing of Boromir, and oh man, it's just for all that I was pissed at him 30 seconds ago, now it's like, no, but not this,
right?
Because he never gets to, like, he was shouting, "I'm sorry, Frodo," but he never gets to see Frodo again to apologize to him. Right, there were so many more things Boromir should have done, and now he doesn't get to, and that makes it even more tragic.
Yeah. And there's I'm gonna have to look it up, because I didn't know this until recently. I saw something on social media going around, so I don't think they ever say it, but I think Aragorn takes like a piece of armor. I can't remember what it's like, a cuff or something, maybe just a bit of like an arm guard or something, and he wears it throughout the rest of the trilogy.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just he takes a piece of Boromir with him everywhere he goes from here on out. And that's just beautiful. And says, "Be at peace, son of Gondor."
He says, "They will look for his coming from the White Tower, but he will not return."
It's brutal.
And
then don't think like you're like off the hook emotionally or whatever. Like
no.
I don't even.
Oh goodness gracious! We got one more thing to do at least.
And then we get the final scene, or I guess the Yeah, I'll call this all one final scene here.
Yeah, yeah. There's a little bit. This is a
Yeah. Frodo's gotten in a boat, and he's going to...
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. And then Sam doesn't care. They draw it out, man.
They really do.
Even knowing that you're still just like, you can't let your buddy drown, Frodo, or we were with you, go it alone. But now someone else has decided that they have chosen to risk their life for it too. So what are you going to do? And he does what he has to. He jumps in the water and he saves his friend.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful, like, we're under the water. We got several under the water shots here, and Sean Astin just sort of reaching up and struggling, and the light coming through, and it's dark below, and the music is playing. Oh, man. And then we hear the splash, right? And it's the Final Fantasy VII thing.
Right. The hand reaches down, the whole thing. And then...
So they get back up in the boat, soaking wet.
And what does he say? Because this is the best line in cinema movie history.
I don't think I can say it without choking up again.
No, I know. It's just... Okay, I'll do this one. You did the last one. I'll power through. Everyone knows it, but you have to say it. I've heard this about a lot of political movements over the years. I remember hearing a lot about like the Occupy Wall Street things or whatever, or some of the Bernie Sanders stuff, and people saying, because they didn't win or because it didn't immediately lead to this legislation or that legislation, these movements failed. Right? And so when you hear Gimli say, again, it helps that we have the benefit of the knowledge that the fellowship would eventually lead to the greatest of all successes. But, of course, you would feel in this moment that you had failed, but that's not always how these movements for justice work. And I think that's... I doesn't say exactly what Tolkien is saying here, even though he was famously against certain allegorical interpretations of his work, not toward any particular conflict, but just to say in general, the battle for good, or the war for good, I guess, is not lost in a battle. The fellowship did not fail.
And even if you do win, say, that conflict with Isildur and, 1,000 years ago or whatever, they won, but you have to keep working, right? Like Sauron came back, right? So it's not only is it not lost here, even if we win, and I'm not giving out spoilers on this, but even if we win, that's not the end of maintaining freedom for all the peoples of Middle-earth.
Right. So Aragorn says, "Not if we hold true to each other. We will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death. Not while we have strength left." And then he, of course, instructs them to leave all that can be spared behind. We travel light. Let's hunt some orc.
Yeah. Gimli's excited. Yeah. Legolas has a cool look on his face. Like they're, all right, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're going to save Merry and Pippin.
We have a goal.
And then they go on the most intense cross-country run I've ever seen in my life.
Then they run
for all
for
of the next
weeks.
movie.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
You guys have been sprinting. It's like, all that training for this.
And then we get one more scene.
One last one.
So Sam and Frodo on the other side of the lake, and they're going to go through all the razor sharp and the swamping and the stinking that Gimli was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And Frodo says, "I hope the others find a safer route."
Yeah.
"Strider will look after them," says Sam. And Frodo says, "I don't suppose we'll ever see them again." But Sam's a little more optimistic.
Yeah.
"We may yet, Mr. Frodo. We may yet."
I love that from here on out, Sam is just going to have to be this sort of optimistic viewpoint. This, even when you can tell that he doesn't believe it all the time. And I think here he does. I think here he's saying, we might be able to pull this off, man.
Right.
And wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't it be something if this just worked? We all keep thinking about all movie. We keep talking about what happens if we fail, and that we'll probably fail, and that we're all gonna die, and the Hobbit's town Shire is gonna burn, and everything. But what if we do see them again? Because, and it's saying so much in that little line when he says we may yet see them. Of course, implied in that is the only way you're gonna see them again is if this works, right? Is if we win in the end,
right?
We're going to have to save the day, and we may get to see our friends again. Beautiful.
So in that way, Frodo carries the burden of the ring, right? But Sam carries Frodo.
Right.
Metaphorically and then literally.
Yeah, right.
And Frodo says, Sam, I'm glad you're with me.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the movie theater.
Uh-huh.
And people being surprised that was the end of this movie.
Right.
Because Sam and Frodo just start walking down the hill.
Just start walking.
And it fades out.
Yeah.
And Enya comes in with May It Be.
Right.
And we were like, wait, hang on. That's the end of this part of this. That's not the end of anything.
Right.
What are we doing?
Right.
And they're right, because really what it is the beginning of this split journey.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, again, it's been a long time since I've read these books, but I had read them more recently then, and so I knew that if that was going to be the end of the movie the way the books end, that was it. But I remember just sounds of protest from the audience as the credits start to roll.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
Good movie.
Yeah. Oh man.
Really, really good movie. And I've rewatched the trilogy, and I'm probably going to do the other two movies again as we go through it deeper. And because Rings of Power will be over, and I'm just drinking up all of this Middle-earth stuff right now. But I think Fellowship is my favorite of the original trilogy because of how world building and character building and how quiet and still, especially those first 30, 45 minutes are. And there's a couple of big action sequences, but it's really not built around those. And as much as I love the Battle of Helm's Deep and the big battle moments, and those are great, and I love all that stuff too, I really do just appreciate these smaller moments, the stuff that we tended to focus on, the really emotional stuff. As much as there are moments in the next two movies that I think get me emotional, and You Bow to No One, stuff like that. Okay, you got me there. But I don't know that anything comes close to those last two that we just talked about. The I Would Have Followed You, My Brother, My King, and My Captain. Don't even leave out Captain. Throwing Captain in the middle of it just felt powerful. My Brother, My Captain, My King. And the I Don't Mean To. I'm not leaving your side, like that stuff. And we'll see, maybe we'll go through it and I'll say, oh no, I forgot about this moment and that moment. I get super emotional here. But I feel like this one really brings a lot of that, just those feels, and isn't sort of a build up to the big epic moments as much. And, but regardless of any of that stuff of comparing or not, it's a great, great movie, man. And like I said, there were a few little things on rewatch that I was like, some of those special effects didn't hold up. Most of them hold up phenomenally, making it almost as watchable today as it was when it first came out. It's not a perfect movie. I think that's one of those things as we've gone back through and noticed, especially if we were, talking about it as hypercritically as people do with things today. There are a lot of things that I think I don't have issue with, but other audiences would. There's a lot of humor that is clearly aimed at younger audiences that for me, as an adult, doesn't add a whole lot. Some of that stuff I can still roll with because you talked about it's kind of important to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the younger audience sometimes. But there's a few groaners, there's a few eye rollers, and I think we could get into an interesting criticism and debate about the director's cut or the extended edition, whatever you want to call it, the full cut of the movie versus the shorter theatrical one that we saw. And comparing, especially, people talk about one of the big complaints of Rings of Power is that I hear is that it's slow. And I was like, man, have you ever read Tolkien?
Yeah.
But one of the things it's clear that they did, if you watch the theatrical cut and then the extended edition, was make the movie go along in a much faster clip. And for sitting in a theater, as we've talked about, I think that was probably the right decision. But for me, in hindsight, and it's weird to say this about 4.5 hour long movies, it still feels a little bit rushed. I still, if you watch this in one sitting, your brain can trick you into thinking that you just watched a story that took place over the span of a couple of days, when it's probably more like months. Even just between Gandalf leaving and coming back to the Shire.
Yeah, in fact, we talked about that when Gandalf's given the roadmap. Like, it's going to be a month and a half before we even get to the pass.
Right. But then, edit, and we're at the pass. Whereas in, say, a television show, especially a slow television show, or in a book, Tolkien or the runners of a television show would have a bunch of conversations and meals and singing on the way to the pass, right? Which is, and it's always debatable about how much of that you want to put in your movie or not. And these movies still do more of it than most, right? It's hard to say that there isn't walking and singing and cooking. All of those things are in this movie. We highlighted them.
Right, yeah. and they still skip Tom Bombadil.
Right.
Right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, as great as these movies are, and I oftentimes hear people say things like, there's never any reason to retell those stories ever again. And maybe they're right. Maybe this Peter Jackson trilogy is just leave it as it is. But I would love to see a longer version of the story with Tom Bombadil and a lot of these other things, and a little bit, more drawn out. I think, finding a better cast of people to play these characters, that's where I think he'd really have a nightmare.
That'd be tough.
But yeah, it would be hard to detach from these actors. But as far as if I were to criticize the story, I think that would be the biggest one, is to say that there could have been a lot more of that, and probably not in a movie, but if you were to redo the story, it might have been better served by being even longer and having more of those details. And not just for the sake of having the details, but also for getting the sake of the scope, like I said, of how long they've been traveling, of how far they've been traveling, which then, makes those connections, like in a Final Fantasy RPG, right? When you're traveling with people for 30 or 40 hours, by the end of the story, you really feel like you know them. Whereas it can feel sometimes, that Legolas and Gimli have known each other for 15 minutes of screen time. They have that one cute interaction about the beard in the dungeons, and now they're besties.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. It all still works for me.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're doing this, but some people want to critique just to critique. They want to find something negative to say so that it doesn't feel like they're homers or whatever.
Right.
And I don't feel that need ever. So I agree. It could be, it could have been an HBO show, and we could have spent 2.5 seasons on the first half of the adventure. But for what it is, I think it does it extraordinarily well. And I think what it is really good. It gets me, just here reading the script, I got emotional. I'm sure you could hear it in my voice, right? It's not something I feel like needs to be picked apart. I absolutely love it. Yeah. And I think that the thematic elements of even the smallest people, and we're not going to give up, and even the best people can be tempted just long enough at just the right moment to send us spiraling toward darkness. And we do need to fight against the bullies, Saruman. We're not giving in just because it's easier or just because you think he's going to win. We're going to fight the evil devil fascist power. I love all of that. I love how these people become a family. And I love where it goes. I love how they continue the trilogy. So, yeah, I think I've said I love it enough times that the message has gotten across.
Yeah. I do think I said on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and then went on actually a podcast on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, where we talked about, with my friend Ryan Blackburn, we talked about the greatest movie trilogies of all time. And, there are 3 different Star Wars trilogies to choose from, and there's Back to the Future and Godfather and all kinds of stuff up there. But I believe that this Lord of the Rings trilogy is the greatest movie trilogy of all time. And I think it's just incredibly, incredibly well done on all fronts. So like you said, I was kind of like reaching for some criticisms there, and that's partially just because I notice these things when people make them of other properties that and then Rings of Power going